Let's talk about interpreting real-world expressions. In our first example, we have a moving company. So a moving company's cost is represented by 120h plus 0.06 times 120h, where h represents how many hours it takes the movers. What part of the expression represents the amount of tax Sarah pays? So let's break this down. So we have a 120h, then we have a 0.06 times 120h. We know that h represents the hours and that we're looking for the amount of tax Sarah pays. So let's start writing that down. We'll write down everything we know, and then we'll use that to figure out what the amount of tax Sarah pays is. So h represents our hours. We know the company is charging $120 per hour because they did 120 times h for that first part. Then when we think about taxes, right? Taxes are represented by percentages, and percentages in an expression would be a decimal. So that 0.06 is the tax rate. To find the amount of tax paid, we multiply the tax rate by the subtotal. The subtotal would be that 120h part because that's representing the amount the moving company is charging, right? They're charging $120 per hour, so we do 120 times h. That gives us our subtotal. And then when we multiply that times the 0.06, that gives us the amount of tax Sarah is paying. So the amount of tax Sarah pays is represented by the 0.06 times 120h part of the expression. Let's look at another example. A rental company's cost is represented by the expression 150 plus 15m, where m represents how many miles were driven. Which part of the expression represents the cost per mile? So we have the 150, we have a part that's 15m, and we know that m represents the miles that were driven. And we're looking for the cost per mile. So let's write down everything we know and use that to figure out the cost per mile. So m represents the miles driven. The company is charging a $150 flat fee. We know this because that 150 isn't being multiplied by anything. So no matter how many miles you drive, you're going to start with that 150 and then add on the cost per mileage. 15m is the charge for the miles driven because 15 times m is giving us that miles cost. So then we're looking for the cost per mile. So that cost is going to be represented just by the 15, right? Because we're taking the cost and timesing it by the number of miles. So the cost per mile must be $15.